Baby rescues pregnant mother bear trapped in a landslide. What he does after will leave you in tears. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Every bit of your support helps us create even more amazing stories for you. The morning sun filtered through the pines surrounding the rustic mountainside cottage, casting dancing shadows across the wooden floor where little Noah James cooed happily. Just 10 months old, his bright blue eyes sparkled with innocent curiosity as he played with wooden blocks, unaware that this ordinary day would soon test the boundaries of what anyone believed possible. Noah's mother, Eliza, had stepped out to gather herbs from their garden, leaving the cabin door slightly ajar to let in the fresh mountain air. The cottage sat nestled between ancient trees at the edge of Whispering Pine Forest, miles from the nearest neighbor. Their peaceful isolation was precisely why Eliza had chosen this place to raise her son, away from the chaos of city life, surrounded only by nature's gentle rhythms. Not far from their home, a magnificent cinnamon-colored bear lumbered slowly along a forest trail. Her swollen belly made her movements deliberate and careful. The forest creatures had given her a wide berth these past months, instinctively respecting the pregnant mother. She paused occasionally to forage for berries, satisfying the growing hunger that seemed constant in her third trimester. The morning dew still clung to the undergrowth, dampening her paws as she methodically searched for sustenance. The bear lifted her head, sensing something wasn't right. A strange stillness had fallen over the forest. The birds had gone quiet. Even the insects seemed to hold their breath. She tilted her head, confused by the sudden silence. Then she felt it, a barely perceptible trembling beneath her paws. Inside the cottage, Noah's blocks tumbled over. He looked around, bewildered by the strange shaking. His favorite stuffed animal tipped over next to him, and he reached for it with pudgy fingers, uncomprehending of the danger brewing outside. The first rumble came like distant thunder, growing quickly into a roar that shattered the morning calm. The mountainside shuddered. Trees swayed, and then, with horrifying swiftness, the earth gave way. A cascade of mud, rocks, and uprooted trees came crashing down the slope. The pregnant bear, too slow to escape the path of destruction, let out a terrified roar as the landslide struck her hindquarters, pinning her against a massive boulder. Dirt and debris piled around her, bearing her lower body up to her swollen belly. Her panicked cries echoed across the valley as she struggled desperately to free herself, thinking only of the vulnerable cubs within her. In the cottage, Noah's eyes widened at the terrible sound. It wasn't like his mother's voice or the wind or anything he'd ever heard before. But somehow, in that mysterious way that transcends language or rational thought, the baby understood. It was a cry for help, and something deep within his innocent heart responded to that call with a clarity that would have astonished anyone watching. As dust settled over the forest and the last of the debris found its resting place, the bear's cries became more plaintive. She was trapped, injured, and growing more terrified with each passing moment, not just for herself, but for her unborn cubs whose future now hung precariously in the balance. Noah placed his tiny hands on the warm wooden floor, pulling himself upright with newfound determination. The distant cries continued, calling to him like a beacon, drawing him toward the partially open door. No adult would have imagined what was about to unfold, a miracle of compassion that defied all explanation, a moment of connection between the most unlikely of souls. Initial helplessness. The mother bear's roars grew more desperate as she struggled against her earthen prison. Each movement sent waves of pain through her injured hindquarters, yet maternal instinct drove her to fight. She could feel her cubs shifting inside her, responding to her distress with movements of their own. The thought of them never seeing daylight filled her with primal terror. She thrashed against the rocks and mud, managing only to sink her paws deeper into the wet earth. Nearby, animals watched from safe distances. A family of deer peered nervously from behind a stand of aspens. Squirrels chattered anxiously from high branches. A fox that had been hunting nearby crept to the edge of the landslide area, sniffing cautiously before retreating with a worried whine. None dared approach the panicked bear, a dangerous creature even in the best circumstances, now made unpredictable by pain and fear. In the cottage, Noah's tiny fingers gripped the edge of a low table as he steadied himself. At 10 months old, walking was still a new skill, each step an adventure in balance and courage. His mother had stepped away for what was supposed to be just a few minutes. She'd gone to the garden on the opposite side of the cottage, completely unaware of both the landslide and her son's awakening determination. Noah took one wobbly step toward the door, then another. The bear's cries seemed to speak directly to something deep within him, something older than language or reason. His stuffed bear, a cherished toy with button eyes and a worn velvet nose, tumbled from his grasp as he moved with singular purpose toward the sound of distress. The door swung wider with a gentle push from Noah's small hand. The bright morning light momentarily blinded him, causing him to blink rapidly. The familiar porch stretched before him, and beyond that, the path that led into the woods where his mother often carried him on morning walks. But today, something was different. The landscape had changed. Where there had once been a gentle slope covered in wildflowers and berry bushes, there was now a chaotic jumble of earth, stone, and broken trees. And the sounds, those heart-wrenching cries that seemed to vibrate through his very bones, came from somewhere within that devastation. Noah lowered himself to hands and knees, a position that offered more stability than his wobbly walking. With the determined focus only the very young possess, unburdened by knowledge of what is impossible, he began to crawl down the path toward the sounds of suffering. Back at the garden, Eliza hummed softly as she gathered thyme and rosemary, completely unaware of the disaster that had struck the other side of the ridge. The cottage's position had sheltered her from both the sight and sound of the landslide. Her basket half filled with herbs, she paused to check her watch. 10 minutes had passed, longer than she'd intended to leave Noah. Though he was safely contained in the cabin's main room, maternal instinct urged her to return. As Eliza rounded the corner of the cottage, a chill ran down her spine. The front door stood open, swaying slightly in the morning breeze. "Noah!" she called, quickening her pace. The basket tumbled from her hands, forgotten as she rushed inside. The empty room answered with terrible silence. The blocks lay scattered. The stuffed bear stared up with button eyes from the floor. But Noah was gone. "Noah!" Panic edged her voice as she rushed back outside, scanning the surroundings frantically. That's when she heard it, the deep, pained roaring from beyond the ridge. And in that moment, a mother's worst fear crystallized into reality. Something was wrong, terribly wrong, and her baby was out there somewhere in the midst of it. Meanwhile, Noah had made his way to the edge of the devastation. His small hands and knees were already dirty from the path, but he showed no hesitation as he encountered the looser soil of the landslide's edge. The bear's cries guided him forward, one determined movement at a time. What should have been impossible for a child his age seemed, in this moment, the most natural thing in the world. A new sound joined the bear's cries, a distant voice calling Noah's name. But the baby was too focused on his mission to register his mother's calls. Instead, he continued forward, navigating around smaller obstacles, sometimes stopping to catch his breath before pressing on. The pregnant bear sensed a new presence approaching. Through her pain and fear, she detected something different from the other forest creatures that had kept their distance. This scent was unfamiliar yet not threatening. She quieted her roars momentarily, head tilted in confusion as she tried to understand what was approaching. That's when she saw him. A human infant, impossibly small and vulnerable, crawling determinedly toward her across the disturbed earth. The sight was so unexpected, so contrary to everything in her experience, that the bear fell silent in astonishment. Her dark eyes tracked the baby's progress with a mixture of wariness and bewilderment. Noah paused at the edge of a small clearing the landslide had created. Just 30 feet away lay the trapped bear, her massive form half buried in debris, her intelligent eyes now fixed on him with an intensity that would have terrified an adult. But Noah saw only another creature in distress. His innocent mind didn't comprehend danger, only suffering that somehow, for reasons beyond understanding, he felt called to address. The moment hung suspended between them, a massive, powerful wild animal and a tiny, defenseless human child, connected by something transcending the natural order. Neither moved, neither made a sound. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what impossible thing might happen next. And then the ground trembled again. Tension and danger increase. A secondary slide began as loosened soil further up the mountain gave way. Though smaller than the first, this new cascade of earth and stone threatened both the trapped bear and the baby who had so inexplicably come to her aid. Rocks tumbled down, bouncing unpredictably. The ground beneath Noah shifted, causing him to lose his precarious balance and tumble sideways. The bear roared anew, struggling more violently against her entrapment. Her movements only caused more destabilization, bringing a fresh fall of debris down around her. One heavy branch crashed down inches from her head, causing her to flinch and cry out in renewed terror. Noah let out a frightened wail as he righted himself. For the first time, fear clouded his innocent determination. He sat in the dirt, tiny face crumpling, as the reality of his situation began to penetrate his limited understanding. The path behind him had changed, making retreat more difficult. The bear before him was making those terrible sounds again, and the ground wouldn't stay still. From the ridge above came a desperate shout. Eliza had spotted her son amid the devastation and was making her way down as quickly as safety allowed, her heart in her throat. "Noah, don't move, baby, Mommy's coming." Her voice broke with fear as she picked her way down, acutely aware of how unstable the ground was. Then she saw what lay beyond her child, the massive form of the injured bear. Horror froze her in place momentarily as the full situation became clear. Her baby was trapped between her and a frightened, injured wild animal with every maternal instinct heightened by pregnancy. The bear heard Eliza's shouts and turned her massive head toward this new threat. Adult humans she understood as dangerous. Her lips drew back, revealing fearsome teeth as a warning growl rumbled from her chest. Despite her trapped state, she was still a formidable creature, fully capable of killing anyone who threatened her or her unborn cubs. Noah, responding to his mother's voice, turned his head toward Eliza, but instead of crawling toward safety as any reasonable person might expect, he turned back to the bear, seemingly torn between the two mothers, one calling him to safety, the other still trapped and suffering. Another small tremor shook the ground. More debris shifted. The bear's position worsened as soil collapsed around her, burying her deeper. Her growls transformed back into cries of pain and fear. That sound seemed to resolve Noah's momentary indecision. With the purely instinctive compassion of the very young, he resumed his crawl, not toward his horrified mother but toward the trapped bear. "Noah, no!" Eliza screamed, scrambling faster down the unstable slope, heedless now of her own safety. But the distance was too great, the footing too treacherous. She watched in helpless terror as her baby approached one of nature's most dangerous predators. What happened next would later be retold throughout the valley as nothing short of miraculous. Noah reached the edge of the debris field that imprisoned the bear. Up close, the animal was enormous, a mountain of fur and muscle that could end his fragile life with a single swipe of her massive paw. The bear's eyes, dark and intelligent, locked onto the tiny human now just a few feet away. Her growls subsided, replaced by a confused whimper. Noah, responding to the bear's distress rather than any sense of self-preservation, reached out a tiny hand toward her. His small fingers hovered in the air between them, a gesture of connection so pure and innocent that it seemed to transcend the natural boundaries between species. Eliza, now frozen in place, could only watch and pray, afraid that any sudden movement or sound from her might trigger the bear's defensive instincts. Tears streamed down her face as she witnessed what seemed like her child's last moments. But the bear did not strike. Instead, she stretched her massive neck forward, bringing her nose close to Noah's outstretched hand. She sniffed once, twice, taking in his scent. Then, in a gesture that defied all natural law, she gently bumped her nose against his palm. A collective gasp seemed to ripple through the hidden watchers of the forest. The deer, the squirrels, the cautious fox, all bore witness to this unprecedented moment of trust between predator and the most vulnerable of prey. Noah, encouraged by this response, placed his small hand on the bear's nose. A smile lit his face, as though this was nothing more extraordinary than petting a neighbor's dog. The fear that had momentarily clouded his mission evaporated, replaced once more by that mysterious determination that had guided him from the start. And then, with the simple clarity that only children possess, Noah turned his attention to the problem at hand. He looked at the debris trapping the bear, then at his own small hands, and made a decision that no adult would have thought possible. He began to dig. An unlikely rescue effort. Noah's tiny fingers plunged into the soft earth surrounding the bear's hindquarters. His movements were clumsy but determined, scooping small handfuls of soil and casting them aside. To any rational observer, the effort would have seemed futile. What could a baby possibly accomplish against tons of fallen earth and rock? Yet there was something in the methodical persistence of his attempts that held a strange power. Eliza remained frozen on the slope, torn between the desperate need to snatch her child from danger and the fear that any sudden movement might provoke the bear into aggression. The scene before her defied all logic. Her infant son apparently trying to dig out a wild predator, and the predator allowing it. She found herself holding her breath, watching a miracle unfold that her mind couldn't fully process. "What is happening?" she whispered to herself, hardly daring to believe what her eyes were showing her. Noah continued his work, occasionally looking up at the bear's face as if to reassure her that help was here. The bear watched him with equal fascination, her earlier panic subsiding into a wary acceptance of this strange little creature and his inexplicable efforts on her behalf. Then, something unexpected happened. As Noah cleared away a small section of debris, his hand brushed against something solid buried beneath the surface. Curious, he dug around it, eventually revealing a sturdy branch about the thickness of his arm. It extended from the main debris pile like a lever, one end buried deep under the material pinning the bear, the other now exposed by Noah's digging. The baby grabbed the stick and pulled, but it barely moved. Undeterred, he tried again, putting his whole body into the effort. The stick shifted slightly, causing a cascade of smaller pebbles to roll away from the bear's trapped hindquarters. The bear felt the subtle change in pressure and responded with renewed hope, pushing against her entrapment. More debris shifted. Noah lost his balance and sat down hard, still clutching the branch. The unexpected jerk actually helped, dislodging more material from around the bear's legs. From her position on the slope, Eliza couldn't see exactly what was happening, but she could tell something was changing. The debris field was shifting. The bear was moving more freely, and somehow, impossibly, her baby seemed to be at the center of this transformation. A new sound drew everyone's attention, the rumble of an approaching vehicle. Residents from the nearest town, alerted by the signs of the landslide, had formed an impromptu rescue party. Their truck had navigated the forest road as far as possible and now sat at the ridgetop. 3 men emerged, equipped with shovels and rope. "Hello? Anyone there?" a deep voice called out. "Here, please, help!" Eliza cried, finally finding her voice. "My son. He's down there with a bear." The men rushed to the ridge edge, taking in the scene below with disbelieving eyes. One of them, an older man with a weathered face and a park ranger's uniform, lifted binoculars to his eyes. "Sweet mercy," he breathed. "I don't believe what I'm seeing." "What is it? What's happening to my baby?" Eliza demanded, still too afraid to move closer. "Ma'am, your son appears to be helping a trapped bear, and the bear is letting him." The ranger's voice held wonder and professional concern in equal measure. "We need to approach very carefully. Any sudden movements could change this situation drastically." Down in the clearing, Noah remained focused on his task, oblivious to the adults gathering above. He had discovered that by pushing on the branch rather than pulling, he could create more space around the bear's trapped legs. His small weight wasn't much, but he applied it with the perfect leverage that only chance, or perhaps something more, could have arranged. The bear sensed the gradual loosening of her prison. With each small shift, hope grew within her. Her cubs moved inside her, as if lending their strength to her efforts. She pushed against the debris in rhythm with Noah's attempts, their unspoken cooperation creating a synergy that accomplished what neither could have done alone. A larger rock rolled away suddenly, creating a gap that the bear immediately exploited. With a powerful twist of her massive body, she freed one hind leg, then used that new leverage to work on freeing the other. Noah clapped his hands in delight at the progress, completely unaware of the danger should the bear panic or lash out. But the mother bear remained eerily calm, focusing her efforts on escape rather than fear or aggression. It was as if she understood, on some primal level, that this small human represented help rather than threat, a distinction that defied all natural instinct. On the ridge, the rescue party had devised a plan. The ranger and another man carefully began making their way down the slope toward Eliza, while the third man returned to the truck to radio for wildlife management backup. They moved with deliberate slowness, afraid that any sudden appearance might startle the bear into defensive action. "Ma'am," the ranger whispered when they reached Eliza, "we need to create a safe exit for your son without provoking the bear. Has she shown any aggression toward him at all?" Eliza shook her head, still unable to fully comprehend what she was witnessing. "No, it's like they're working together. I can't explain it." The ranger nodded, his experienced eyes assessing the situation with professional detachment that couldn't quite mask his amazement. "I've worked with wildlife for 30 years, and I've never seen anything like this. That bear should be attacking anything that comes near her right now, especially in her condition." Down below, a critical moment had arrived. The bear gathered herself for one final effort to free her remaining trapped leg. Noah, sensing her intention, moved back slightly, watching with wide eyes. With a powerful surge, the bear heaved herself forward. Earth and rocks cascaded away as her massive body lurched free of its prison at last. For a heart-stopping moment, she stood at her full height, an enormous cinnamon-colored mountain of muscle and fur, easily capable of killing everyone present with a few swipes of her powerful paws. Blood matted the fur on her back legs where the debris had injured her, but she was whole, mobile, and free. Eliza's heart seemed to stop. The ranger tensed, hand moving instinctively to the tranquilizer gun at his belt. Everyone held their breath, waiting for the newly freed predator's next move. The bear swayed slightly, adjusting to standing on injured legs. Her dark eyes fixed on Noah, who sat just a few feet away, looking up at her with no trace of fear. In that suspended moment, something profound and inexplicable passed between them. Something beyond words, beyond species, beyond the natural order itself. Then, to the astonishment of all watching, the massive bear lowered her head until she was at eye level with the tiny human who had somehow facilitated her rescue. Her breath ruffled Noah's wispy hair as she sniffed him once more, committing his scent to memory. Noah reached out again, placing his small palm on the bear's broad nose. A smile of pure joy lit his face as he patted her gently, exactly as he might pat his stuffed toy back in the safety of his home. "Bear," he said clearly, his first recognizable word, spoken not in the safety of his home, but in this extraordinary moment of connection with a wild creature. The emotional connection. Tears sprang to Eliza's eyes at the sound of her son's first word. Even the stoic ranger seemed moved by the scene unfolding before them. The bear remained still, allowing the touch of the small human with a gentleness that defied explanation. "I've never," the ranger whispered, "in all my years. Bears don't do this, especially not pregnant females. They're the most dangerous bears in the woods." Yet this bear was defying everything science and experience said she should do. Instead of attacking or fleeing, she maintained this moment of connection with the infant who had, against all odds, contributed to her freedom. Noah's small hands moved from the bear's nose to her ear, which he grabbed and tugged gently as if it were a toy. The adults collectively gasped, but the bear simply tilted her head, accommodating the curious exploration with miraculous patience. A low rumble emanated from the bear's chest, not a growl of warning, but something softer, almost like a purr. The vibration seemed to delight Noah, who giggled in response. The sound of childish laughter rang out across the devastated landscape, transforming it momentarily from a scene of disaster to one of unexpected joy. The second ranger had arrived at the ridge, accompanied by a wildlife veterinarian who had been in town when the call came through. They watched in professional amazement, the vet already preparing a long-distance tranquilizer dart, not to capture the bear, but to treat her visible injuries once this strange interaction concluded. "Should we try to retrieve the child?" the second ranger asked quietly. The lead ranger shook his head slightly. "Any approach might break whatever spell is happening here. I think we wait. The bear isn't showing any signs of aggression. In fact," he trailed off, unable to articulate the extraordinary nature of what they were witnessing. Down in the clearing, the connection between Noah and the bear continued. The massive creature lowered herself carefully to a sitting position, favoring her injured legs. This brought her closer to Noah's level, as if deliberately making herself less intimidating to the tiny human. Noah, with the adaptability of the very young, accepted this new arrangement happily. He scooted closer, reaching out to touch the bear's fur. His small fingers disappeared into the thick pelt, exploring its texture with innocent wonder. The bear's eyes, so dark and intelligent, remained fixed on the child. Those who knew bears well might have recognized something remarkable in that gaze. Not the blank stare of a wild animal, but something closer to recognition. Perhaps even gratitude. Eliza, gathering her courage, had begun to inch closer, desperate to reach her son yet afraid of disrupting the delicate peace before her. The lead ranger kept pace with her, tranquilizer gun ready but not raised. "Easy," he whispered. "Slow movements only." The bear's ear twitched, registering their approach. Her massive head turned slightly, acknowledging the adult humans without taking her main focus from Noah. A low, warning rumble vibrated from her chest. Not directed at the child, but at those approaching. Eliza froze, maternal fear warring with maternal courage. She was still 20 feet away from her son, so close yet impossibly distant with the bear between them. Noah, oblivious to his mother's distress or the tension in the air, continued his innocent exploration of the bear's fur. He had found a burr tangled in the thick pelt and was working to remove it with focused determination. His tiny fingers worked at the knot until the burr came free. He held it up triumphantly. "Look," he said, offering his prize to the bear with the straightforward generosity of a child. The bear sniffed at the burr, then at Noah's hand. Then, in a gesture that left even the experienced rangers speechless, she gently licked the child's fingers with her massive tongue. Noah giggled again, clearly delighted by the sensation. "Tickles," he said, adding another word to his suddenly emerging vocabulary. Eliza couldn't hold back a sob at the sound of her son's voice, speaking here, in this impossible circumstance, words she had been waiting months to hear. The bear's head swung toward her at the sound, eyes narrowing slightly. But Noah, perhaps sensing tension, did something remarkable. He placed his small hand on the bear's muzzle, redirecting her attention to himself. Then, with his other hand, he pointed at Eliza. "Mama," he said clearly. The bear looked from Noah to Eliza and back again, as if processing this new information. Her posture, which had tensed at Eliza's approach, relaxed slightly. It was as if Noah's simple identification had somehow communicated something vital. That Eliza was not a threat but another mother, one whose cub sat before them. Understanding seemed to pass between the two mothers, one human, one bear, connected by the innocent being between them. The bear shifted her weight, beginning to rise. For a terrifying moment it seemed she might charge at Eliza, but instead she gently nudged Noah with her nose, pushing him several inches across the ground toward his mother. Noah looked up at the bear with surprise, then back at his mother. Understanding dawned on his small face. The bear nudged him again, more insistently this time. The message was unmistakable. "Go to your mother. I must go to protect my own cubs." Noah reached up one more time, placing his palm against the bear's cheek in a gesture of farewell that seemed impossibly wise for his age. The bear held still for this final touch, her eyes never leaving the child's face. Then Noah turned and began crawling toward Eliza. The bear watched his progress, making no move to follow or to flee, simply witnessing his return to his mother's care. The miraculous breakthrough. Eliza dropped to her knees as Noah approached, arms outstretched, tears streaming freely down her face. When he finally reached her, she gathered him into a fierce embrace, unable to believe he was safe and whole after what she had just witnessed. "Noah, oh my God, Noah," she sobbed, running her hands over him, checking instinctively for any injuries. But he was untouched, muddy and disheveled, but completely unharmed. The lead ranger approached cautiously, his experienced eyes never leaving the bear. "Ma'am, we should move back slowly now. Give her space to leave." Eliza nodded, clutching Noah to her chest, as she began to edge backward up the slope. The bear remained seated, watching them retreat with that same strange intelligence in her gaze. The wildlife veterinarian had made her way down to join them. Tranquilizer gun held ready but pointed at the ground. "Her back legs appear injured," she said quietly. "But not severely. I can dart her now and treat her, or—" "No," the lead ranger said firmly. "No darts. Not after what we just saw. Let her go with dignity." As if understanding his words, the bear began to rise. She stood shakily, testing her weight on her injured hind legs. Blood matted the fur, but the wounds didn't appear to be life-threatening. She would recover, given time and peace. Noah, still held securely in his mother's arms, pointed back at the bear. "Bye-bye," he said clearly, waving his small hand. The adults exchanged glances, still struggling to process the extraordinary events they had witnessed. The bear seemed to acknowledge Noah's farewell, dipping her massive head slightly before turning with surprising grace, considering her injuries. With deliberate care, she began to make her way back into the forest, pausing only once to look back at the small human who had so inexplicably come to her aid. In that final glance was something that even the experienced rangers couldn't fully interpret. A recognition, perhaps, of something rare and precious that had passed between species that should have been mortal enemies. Then she disappeared into the shadows of the pines, her cinnamon coat blending with the dappled forest light until she was gone from sight. A collective exhale seemed to pass through the group. The tension that had held them all in its grip began to dissipate, replaced by a growing sense of wonder at what they had just experienced. "In 30 years of wildlife management," the lead ranger said, shaking his head, "I have never seen anything like that. Never." The veterinarian nodded in agreement. "It defies everything we know about bear behavior, especially pregnant females. They're typically the most aggressive, the most defensive." Eliza barely heard them. She was focused entirely on Noah, who was now patting her tear-stained cheeks with his small hands, his expression concerned. "Mama sad?" he asked, his third new word of this extraordinary day. "No, baby, Mama happy, so happy you're safe." She hugged him close again, still unable to fully comprehend the miracle she had witnessed. "How did you know? How did you know she needed help?" Noah, of course, couldn't answer such a complex question, but he pointed in the direction the bear had gone and said simply, "Bear hurt." "Help bear?" The second ranger, who had been keeping watch from higher ground, called down to them. "We should head back up. There could be more slides, and we need to get the little one checked out." Eliza nodded, rising to her feet with Noah still held securely in her arms. As they began the careful climb back up the slope, aided by the rangers, she couldn't help but look back at the small clearing where the impossible had happened. Already, it was beginning to seem dreamlike, too extraordinary to be real. Yet Noah's behavior was proof enough that something profound had occurred. He kept looking back over her shoulder, waving occasionally as if still communicating with his unlikely friend. "Bear, baby," he said at one point, patting his own stomach and then pointing in the direction the bear had gone. "Yes," Eliza confirmed, amazed at his understanding. "The bear is going to have babies, like you were my baby." Noah nodded, seeming satisfied with this explanation. Then he laid his head on Eliza's shoulder, the excitement and exertion of the morning finally catching up to him. By the time they reached the ridge top, he was fast asleep, his small face peaceful in the aftermath of his extraordinary adventure. The news of what had happened spread quickly through the small community. By evening, local television crews had arrived, eager to interview Eliza and the rangers who had witnessed the event. Wildlife experts from the state university were already on their way, drawn by reports of a bear-human interaction that defied all known behavioral patterns. Eliza deflected most of the attention, protective of Noah, and still processing her own emotions about the experience. She allowed the local doctor to examine Noah thoroughly, relieved when he was pronounced perfectly healthy despite his adventure. "He's talking now?" the doctor asked, having known Noah since birth and aware that he had been a late bloomer in terms of verbal development. "Yes," Eliza confirmed. 3 words today: bear, tickles, and mama. The doctor raised his eyebrows. Quite a vocabulary explosion. Sometimes stress can actually trigger developmental leaps, but this is remarkable even considering that. As the excitement in the town grew, the rangers organized a small monitoring team to track the injured bear, concerned about her welfare and that of her unborn cubs. They found her den late that afternoon. A natural cave not far from the landslide site, well hidden and defensible. She made it home, the lead ranger reported to Eliza that evening. "We're setting up some camera traps to monitor her from a safe distance, but she seems to be moving well despite her injuries. I'd say her cubs have an excellent chance." Eliza thanked him, grateful for the update. As night fell, she sat in the rocking chair beside Noah's crib, watching him sleep. His small face was serene, his breathing deep and regular. Nothing in his peaceful slumber suggested the extraordinary role he had played that day. "How did you know?" she whispered again, reaching down to stroke his soft hair. "What did you see that we don't?" Noah stirred slightly but didn't wake. Outside, a gentle rain began to fall, washing away the last traces of the day's extraordinary events from the landscape, if not from the memories of those who had witnessed them. Tears and relief. 3 weeks passed, and spring settled fully over the mountains. The landslide area had been secured by forestry officials, and new growth was already beginning to reclaim the scarred earth. Life in the small community had largely returned to normal, though the story of the baby and the bear had traveled far, drawing occasional journalists or wildlife researchers to their remote corner of the world. Eliza had deflected most of the attention, protective of Noah's privacy and still processing her own complex feelings about that day. The rangers had continued their discreet monitoring of the mother bear, reporting that she remained in her den, her movement suggesting the birth of her cubs was imminent. Noah, for his part, had undergone a remarkable transformation. The boy, who had barely spoken before the incident, now chattered constantly, his vocabulary expanding daily. He spoke often of his bear, asking to visit her until Eliza gently explained that the bear needed privacy for her babies, just as human mothers did. On a warm Tuesday morning, as Eliza and Noah ate breakfast on their porch, the lead ranger's truck appeared on the forest road. He approached with an unusual spring in his step, a broad smile visible even from a distance. "Morning," he called as he reached the cottage. "Thought you might like an update. Our mama bear had her cubs last night, 3 healthy little ones." Eliza smiled, genuinely pleased at the news. "That's wonderful. How is she doing?" "Remarkably well. The injuries from the landslide have healed nicely." The ranger hesitated, then added, "There's something else. Something I thought you and the little one might want to see. If you're up for a short hike, that is." Curiosity piqued, Eliza agreed. She packed a small backpack with water and snacks, settled Noah into his carrier, and followed the ranger along a gentle trail that skirted the landslide area. They walked for about 20 minutes before the ranger held up a hand for silence. "Just through these trees," he whispered. "We've set up a wildlife blind, very quiet now." He led them into a camouflage structure with narrow viewing slots. Inside, another ranger operated a sophisticated camera with a powerful zoom lens. On a small monitor attached to the camera, Eliza could see the entrance to a cave partially hidden by thick underbrush. "She's due to emerge soon for her morning forage," the camera operator whispered. "The cubs have been staying in the den, but today might be different." Noah, sensing the excitement, remained unusually quiet in his carrier, his bright eyes fixed on the monitor with intense focus. Eliza adjusted him on her hip, wondering if he somehow understood the significance of what they might witness. They didn't have to wait long. A movement at the cave entrance drew everyone's attention. The massive form of the mother bear appeared, her cinnamon coat gleaming in the dappled sunlight. She paused, sniffing the air cautiously before stepping fully into the clearing. Her injuries had indeed healed well. She moved with the fluid grace natural to her species despite her considerable size. But what made Eliza's breath catch was what followed the mother into the sunlight. 3 tiny cubs, their fur a lighter shade than their mother's, their movements still wobbly and uncertain. They tumbled over each other, exploring their surroundings with the insatiable curiosity of the very young. 3 healthy cubs, the lead ranger whispered, his voice filled with professional satisfaction. "That's exceptional, especially after the trauma she endured. Usually, stress during pregnancy can lead to complications." Noah squirmed in Eliza's arms, pointing excitedly at the screen. "Bear babies!" he exclaimed, his voice rising above the whispered tones of the adults. The rangers tensed, concerned the sound might carry to the sensitive ears of the mother bear. But something extraordinary happened instead. The bear's head lifted, her nose testing the air with renewed interest. She turned slowly, her gaze seeming to fix directly on the wildlife blind, though it was well camouflaged and downwind from her position. "That's impossible," the camera operator murmured. "She can't know we're here." Yet the bear's behavior suggested otherwise. She stared in their direction for a long moment, her cubs wrestling playfully around her massive paws. Then, in a move that left the rangers speechless, she nudged her cubs with her nose, guiding them a few steps closer to the blind. "She's presenting them," the lead ranger said in disbelief, "like she wants us to see them." "Not us," Eliza whispered, a chill running down her spine. "Noah, she remembers his scent. Somehow she knows he's here." As if confirming her words, Noah reached toward the monitor, his small fingers tracing the outline of the mother bear and her cubs. "My bear," he said with the simple possessiveness of a child. "My bear babies." The mother bear remained still, cubs now clustered around her, their tiny heads swiveling curiously in all directions. She continued to stare toward the blind as if waiting for something. "This is unprecedented," the lead ranger breathed. "It's like she's trying to communicate." A strange impulse seized Eliza, one that went against all logic and caution, yet felt irresistibly right. "I'm going to take Noah outside," she announced quietly. "Absolutely not," the ranger responded immediately. "That's a wild animal with cubs, the most dangerous combination in these mountains." "She came to show Noah her cubs," Eliza insisted, surprising herself with her certainty. "She remembers what he did for her. I know it sounds crazy, but it is crazy," the ranger cut her off. "I can't allow a child to be put at risk, no matter what happened before." Noah, however, had his own ideas. With the surprising strength that sometimes manifests in determined children, he wriggled free of Eliza's grasp and toddled to the blind's narrow door before anyone could stop him. His small hands worked the simple latch with unexpected dexterity. "Noah!" Eliza lunged after him, but it was too late. He had pushed the door open and stepped into the clearing. Time seemed to suspend as Eliza reached the doorway, the rangers frozen in horror behind her. Noah stood in the dappled sunlight, tiny and vulnerable in the vast forest clearing, facing the massive predator and her cubs from 30 yards away. The mother bear's reaction was immediate, but not what anyone expected. Rather than charging to protect her cubs or fleeing with them into the safety of the forest, she remained perfectly still. Dark eyes fixed on the small human who had once helped free her from an early grave. Noah, showing no fear whatsoever, raised his hand in the same wave he had used to bid the bear farewell weeks earlier. "Hi, bear," he called, his childish voice carrying clearly across the clearing. One of the cubs, bolder than its siblings, took a curious step forward. The mother bear made no move to stop it, though she watched with the vigilant attention of any protective parent. Eliza had reached Noah now, her hand closing firmly but gently around his small wrist. "We need to go back inside, sweetie," she whispered, fear making her voice tremble despite her efforts to stay calm. But Noah resisted, pointing excitedly at the bears. "Look, Mama, bear show babies." The lead ranger had followed them out, tranquilizer gun now in hand but held low against his leg. "Back away very slowly," he instructed, his voice barely audible. "Don't make any sudden movements." The mother bear shifted her weight, and everyone tensed. But instead of approaching, she made a soft chuffing sound to her cubs. The curious one that had started forward retreated obediently to her side. Then, with deliberate slowness, the mother bear lowered herself to a sitting position, cubs tumbling around her paws in continued play. The message seemed clear. "I am not a threat. I am simply showing my cubs to yours." "I've never—" the ranger began, then fell silent, professional knowledge failing him in the face of behavior that defied all scientific understanding of these animals. Noah tugged at Eliza's hand, looking up with pleading eyes. "Pet bear babies?" "No, sweetheart," she replied firmly, despite the surreal nature of having to refuse such a request. "Bear babies stay with their mama, just like you stay with yours." Noah considered this, then nodded with surprising acceptance. He waved again to the bear family. "Bye-bye, bears." What happened next would later be questioned by scientists and wildlife experts around the world when the ranger's footage went viral. The mother bear rose again to her feet, gathered her cubs with gentle nudges of her massive muzzle, and then, most extraordinarily of all, dipped her head in what could only be described as a bow toward Noah and Eliza before turning to disappear back into the forest. The clearing fell silent, broken only by the chirping of birds and the distant rush of a mountain stream. The humans stood motionless, trying to process what they had just witnessed. "Did that really just happen?" the camera operator whispered from the doorway of the blind. The lead ranger shook his head slowly, tranquilizer gun now hanging forgotten at his side. "I recorded it, and I still don't believe it." Eliza knelt beside Noah, turning him to face her. "Noah, how did you know the bear wanted to show you her babies?" Noah's answer, delivered with the simple confidence of a child who doesn't yet understand that some things are supposed to be impossible. Bear promised. The lasting impact. The footage captured by the rangers that day would indeed go viral, sparking heated debates among wildlife experts, behavioral scientists, and the public at large. Some dismissed it as a carefully staged hoax. Others suggested the bear had been previously habituated to humans, perhaps as an illegal pet released into the wild. A few even proposed more esoteric explanations involving psychic connections or ancient animal-human bonds, usually relegated to myth and legend. But for those who had witnessed it firsthand, no explanation was necessary. They had seen something rare and precious, a moment of connection that transcended species, logic, and the natural order. A miracle, some might say, though others preferred terms like unprecedented behavioral anomaly or statistical outlier in interspecies interactions. For Noah, the experience would shape his life in ways no one could have predicted. His vocabulary continued to explode in the months following the bear encounter, as if some block to his development had been permanently removed. By his second birthday, he was speaking in complete sentences, often about animals and their needs, their feelings, their silent communications that most humans had forgotten how to hear. Eliza noticed other changes, too. Noah seemed to have a preternatural affinity for injured creatures. Birds with broken wings would allow him to approach and help when they would flee from others. The neighbor's aggressive dog that everyone feared would become docile and friendly in Noah's presence. Even insects that found their way into the cottage were gently captured and released outside rather than squashed. The lead ranger, whose name was Michael, became a regular visitor to their mountain home. Initially, he came to provide updates on the mother bear and her cubs, who thrived in the wilderness under the discreet monitoring of wildlife officials. Later, he came because he recognized in Noah something extraordinary that deserved nurturing, a gift for understanding animals that could benefit conservation efforts if properly channeled. On Noah's third birthday, Michael arrived with a special gift, a custom-made stuffed bear with 3 tiny cubs attached by Velcro to their mother's sides. "The real ones are getting too big to stay with Mama much longer," he explained as Noah gleefully accepted the gift. Cubs usually stay about a year and a half before heading out on their own. These ones have stayed almost 2 years now. That's unusual. "Like they don't want to leave her?" Eliza asked, setting out coffee for them both while Noah played with his new toys. Michael nodded thoughtfully. "Or like she's teaching them something important. Something she wants them to remember." A comfortable silence fell between them as they watched Noah carefully arranging his bear family in a corner of the living room, speaking to them in a mix of English and a language entirely his own. Soft growls and huffs that sometimes made Eliza's skin prickle with their authenticity. "Have you given any thought to my suggestion?" Michael asked eventually, stirring his coffee. "About the special program at the university?" Eliza sighed, torn as she had been since he first mentioned the possibility. The wildlife biology department had expressed interest in studying Noah's unusual abilities after reviewing the bear footage. They had proposed a series of carefully designed interactions with various animals, all under close supervision and with strict ethical guidelines. The potential benefits to conservation efforts were significant, they argued. Understanding how a child like Noah communicated with animals could revolutionize wildlife management and protection. "He's still so young," she replied, the protective instinct of a mother warring with recognition of her son's extraordinary gift. "And I worry about the attention. You've seen how some of those internet comments get." Michael nodded, understanding. The viral footage had brought not just scientific interest but also unwanted attention from those who sought to exploit or sensationalize what had happened. There had been offers from reality TV producers, children's book publishers seeking to fictionalize the story, even a few religious groups suggesting Noah had been divinely blessed. The university program would be completely confidential, Michael assured her. No publicity, no cameras except for research purposes. And they've promised to follow your lead. Stop immediately if you or Noah ever feel uncomfortable. Eliza watched her son playing, his expression serious as he arranged and rearranged his bear family in different configurations. "What do you think they might discover?" she asked quietly. Michael considered the question carefully before answering. "Honestly, I think they might learn that we've lost something important, something Noah still has, a way of communicating with the natural world that might have been common in our distant ancestors but has been forgotten or ignored as we've built our technological civilization. You think all children might have had this ability once? Maybe. Or maybe Noah is special. 1 in a million. Either way, understanding it better could help us rebuild connections that have been severed for the benefit of humans and animals alike. Their conversation was interrupted by Noah, who approached with his stuffed bear family clutched to his chest, his expression unusually serious for a 3-year-old. "Real bears coming back," he announced with the simple confidence that still sometimes startled adults who underestimated him due to his age. Eliza and Michael exchanged glances. "What do you mean, sweetie?" Eliza asked gently. "Tomorrow," Noah said firmly. "By the big rocks, they want to say goodbye." An inexplicable chill ran down Eliza's spine. Noah had made similar pronouncements before, telling her a bird would come to their window with a broken wing, or that the forest would be especially noisy before a storm. He had been right each time, yet this was different. The bear family hadn't been seen in their area for months, having migrated to more remote parts of the forest according to the tracking devices discreetly attached to the mother. Michael leaned forward, professional interest piqued despite his skepticism. "Noah, how do you know the bears are coming back?" Noah tilted his head, considering the question with a seriousness beyond his years. "She told me," he replied simply. "In my head." He tapped his temple with one small finger. The adults shared another look. Concern, wonder, and just a touch of the fear that comes from confronting something beyond ordinary understanding. "Well," Michael said finally, "I suppose we should be there to meet them if they do come." And so, the next morning found them at the Big Rocks, a distinctive formation near where the landslide had occurred nearly 2 years earlier. Michael had brought along a colleague, despite Eliza's reluctance to involve more people. The woman, Dr. Samantha Chen, was a renowned expert in animal cognition who had been quietly consulting on Noah's case since the viral video emerged. "I still think this is a wild goose chase," Dr. Chen remarked as they set up a discreet observation post among the trees. "The tracking collar shows the mother bear 15 miles north of here as of yesterday." Michael shrugged, setting up his camera equipment with practiced efficiency. "Probably, but I've learned not to discount Noah's intuitions." Noah himself showed no doubt whatsoever. He sat patiently on a fallen log, his stuffed bear family arranged beside him, occasionally whispering to them as if sharing secrets about their real counterparts. They waited through the morning, the forest alive with ordinary sounds and movements, but showing no signs of large predators. Dr. Chen grew increasingly skeptical, checking her watch and the tracking data on her tablet with growing frequency. Even Michael began to wonder if this would be the time Noah's mysterious connection failed. Then, as midday approached, a hush fell over the forest. The birdsong ceased abruptly. Squirrels that had been chattering in nearby trees fell silent and disappeared into their holes. Even the insects seemed to pause their constant hum. Noah stood up from his log, face brightening with anticipation. "They're coming," he whispered, pointing toward a dense thicket that bordered the clearing. Dr. Chen checked her tablet once more, eyebrows rising in surprise. "The collar signal is moving, fast, heading this way, but that's impossible. Bears don't cover that kind of distance and—" Her words cut off as the thicket rustled. Everyone held their breath as the branches parted to reveal the massive form of the mother bear. She emerged slowly into the clearing, followed by 3 nearly grown cubs, no longer the tiny balls of fur they had been, but adolescent bears preparing for independence. "Remarkable," Dr. Chen breathed. All skepticism vanished from her voice. simply remarkable. The bear family paused at the edge of the clearing, the mother's nose testing the air, her gaze fixed immediately on the human's position, though they had chosen their spot carefully, with the wind direction in mind. Noah stepped forward before anyone could stop him. Eliza made a small sound of distress but remained where she was, trusting her son's connection with these creatures in a way that defied rational explanation. "Hi, bears," Noah called, waving as he had that first day at the wildlife blind. The mother bear huffed softly, nudging her cubs forward into the clearing. They came closer than any wild bear family should approach humans, stopping about 20 feet from Noah. The cubs, nearly as large as adult black bears now, though not yet possessing their mother's full size, watched the small human with evident curiosity. What followed was a scene that would challenge scientific understanding and remain etched in the memories of all who witnessed it. Noah, with the innocent boldness of childhood, began to communicate with the bears. Not in words exactly, but in a series of subtle gestures, expressions, and soft vocalizations that seemed to convey meaning beyond what should have been possible. The mother bear responded in kind, moving her massive head in particular ways, shifting her weight, making sounds too low for the human adults to fully hear, but that Noah seemed to understand perfectly. The cubs watched, learning, occasionally adding their own contributions to this impossible conversation. Dr. Chen recorded everything, her scientific mind racing to categorize and understand what she was seeing, even as the emotional impact brought unexpected tears to her eyes. After about 10 minutes of this extraordinary exchange, Noah turned to the adults with a solemn expression. "They're going away," he announced, "far away over the mountains. The babies are big now. They need their own places." "Migration?" Michael murmured. "We've seen signs of it in other bears in the region. Food sources shifting due to climate change." Noah turned back to the bears, raised his hand in farewell, and said something in that strange language of soft growls that had become part of his communication with animals. The mother bear rose to her full height, an imposing sight that made even Michael's hand move instinctively toward his tranquilizer gun, but there was no aggression in her posture. She was simply saying goodbye in the most dramatic way she knew how. Then she dropped back to all fours, huffed to her cubs, and led them back toward the thicket. At the edge of the clearing, she paused for one final look at Noah, a look that conveyed something so profound that even those who didn't share Noah's gift could feel its import. Then they were gone, disappearing into the forest as suddenly as they had appeared. Noah walked back to the adults, his expression a complicated mixture of happiness and sadness that seemed too mature for his young face. He reached for his mother's hand, seeking comfort in her familiar touch. "Did they really tell you they're going away?" Dr. Chen asked gently, scientific curiosity temporarily overcoming her amazement. Noah nodded, his small fingers tightening around Eliza's. "Over the mountains, where there's more food and fewer people. The cubs need to find their own places to live." "And did she say anything else?" Michael asked, kneeling to Noah's level. Noah was quiet for a moment, processing thoughts and impressions too complex for his developing vocabulary. Finally, he said, "She said, remember. Remember how to talk to animals. Teach others." As the group walked back toward their vehicles, Noah riding on Michael's shoulders with his stuffed bear family clutched to his chest, Dr. Chen fell into step beside Eliza. "Your son has an extraordinary gift," she said quietly. "I've studied animal-human interactions for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like what I witnessed today. If he's willing, if you're willing, he could help us bridge a gap that's existed since humans first separated themselves from the natural world." Eliza watched her son, animatedly describing something to Michael in a mixture of English and bear sounds. "I think he'd like that," she said finally, "as long as it helps the animals. That's all he really cares about." Dr. Chen nodded, understanding. "That's all any of us should care about in the end. We're just remembering it a little later than Noah." As they reached the parking area, Noah pointed excitedly at something in the distance. Following his gesture, they saw 3 large birds circling above the forest canopy. "Eagles!" Noah exclaimed. "They're saying hello." Eliza and Dr. Chen shared a smile, no longer questioning the truth of Noah's perceptions. In his innocent wisdom, this extraordinary child was teaching them all how to listen again to the world around them, a world filled with voices they had forgotten how to hear. A call to action. 10 years passed. The small mountain cabin expanded to include a modest research facility where Noah, now 13, worked alongside scientists from around the world to document and understand his unique abilities. The bear miracle, as the media had dubbed it, had given way to the more scientifically termed Interspecies Communication Project, though locals still sometimes referred to Noah simply as the Bear Boy. Noah had grown into a thoughtful teenager with an unassuming manner that belied his extraordinary gifts. His dark hair, usually tousled from days spent outdoors, fell across eyes that still held the same innocent wisdom they had when he was a toddler. Though he attended regular school online, his real education came from the forest and its inhabitants, and increasingly from wildlife preserves around the world that invited him to work with endangered species or animals resistant to conventional conservation efforts. On this particular autumn morning, Noah sat cross-legged on the observation deck attached to their expanded home, eyes closed, listening to the forest with more than just his ears. Beside him, Dr. Chen, now a permanent member of the research team and something of a surrogate aunt to Noah, made notes on her tablet. 3 deer at the western creek, Noah said without opening his eyes. A fox near the old Landslide area, and... He paused, head tilting slightly. Something new, something not from here. Dr. Chen looked up, instantly alert. Noah's perceptions had proven remarkably accurate over the years. "What do you mean, not from here?" Noah opened his eyes, a small furrow between his brows. A big cat, not a mountain lion, bigger, scared and hurt. Dr. Chen was already reaching for her communication device. Over the years, they had developed protocols for Noah's more unusual perceptions. Location? Northeast Valley by the cave system. Noah was already standing, reaching for his field kit, a backpack containing first aid supplies for both humans and animals, tracking equipment, and the specialized communication tools he had helped develop. Within 15 minutes, a small team had assembled. Noah, Dr. Chen, Michael, now the regional wildlife director, and a veterinarian specializing in large predators. They moved through the forest with practiced efficiency, Noah leading the way with unerring confidence despite the absence of any visible trail. Could it be an escaped zoo animal? The vet asked quietly as they climbed a ridge overlooking the Northeast Valley. Michael shook his head. No reports of escapes from any facilities within hundreds of miles, and no private collectors with exotic cats that we know of. "It's a tiger," Noah said simply, pausing at the top of the ridge. "An old female. She's very afraid and in pain." The adults exchanged concerned glances. A tiger in the North American wilderness was not just unusual, it was impossible without human involvement. "Poachers," Dr. Chen suggested grimly. "Illegal wildlife trafficking. She may have escaped during transport." Noah had already started down the slope toward the cave system that riddled this part of the mountains. The others followed, talking quietly among themselves about possible scenarios and safety protocols. though they trusted Noah's abilities implicitly after years of evidence. A wounded tiger represented a level of danger that couldn't be taken lightly. They reached the cave entrance, a dark opening in the rock face partially obscured by brush and fallen branches. Noah paused, closing his eyes again to listen with that extra sense that science had documented but never fully explained. "She's inside," he whispered. "About 30 feet in a side chamber she's trying to hide." Michael readied a tranquilizer rifle, a precaution they always took when approaching potentially dangerous wildlife. "Noah, I think you should let us go first this time." But Noah shook his head with the quiet confidence that had become his hallmark. "She won't respond to you. She's never had reason to trust humans." He looked at the rifle with disapproval. "And she definitely won't trust that." Before anyone could stop him, Noah had slipped into the cave entrance, moving with the silent grace he had learned from years of wildlife observation. Dr. Chen started to follow, but Michael held her back. "Give him a moment," he said quietly. "You know how this works by now." Inside the cave, Noah moved slowly, allowing his eyes to adjust to the dimness. He made a soft, rumbling sound in his throat, not a tiger's roar, but a gentler vocalization that communicated curiosity and non-aggression. He had learned over the years that while each species had its own language, certain emotional tones translated across species boundaries. A low growl answered from deeper within the cave, warning, threatening, but with an undercurrent of fear and pain that confirmed Noah's earlier impression. He continued forward, still making occasional reassuring sounds. The side chamber opened to his right, and there she was, a magnificent Siberian tiger, her orange coat dull with dust and spotted with dried blood. She was thin, suggesting weeks without proper food, and she held one front paw awkwardly off the ground. Most telling was the raw ring of damaged fur around her neck, evidence of a collar or chain recently removed or escaped. She growled again, more threateningly, as Noah appeared in the chamber entrance. Her ears flattened against her skull, and despite her injury, she gathered herself as if preparing to pounce. Noah remained perfectly still, meeting her amber eyes with calm respect. Then, slowly, he sat down on the cave floor, making himself smaller, less threatening. He began to speak, partly in words, partly in the language of subtle sounds and body positions he had developed for communicating with big cats. "I know you're hurt," he said softly. "I know humans did this to you. But I'm not like them. I want to help." The tiger watched him warily, muscles still tensed for attack. But something in Noah's manner, his stillness, his lack of fear, the strange sounds he made that echoed her own language, gave her pause. Noah continued his gentle communication, explaining without words that he understood her pain, that he represented help rather than threat, that she was safe now from whatever humans had harmed her before. Gradually, the tiger's posture changed. Her ears moved forward from their flattened position. The tension in her shoulders eased slightly. She still watched him with intense focus, but the immediate threat of attack diminished. Outside the cave, the rest of the team waited anxiously. Dr. Chen checked her watch. 15 minutes had passed since Noah entered. Though they had strict protocols about intervention times, years of experience had taught them to trust Noah's judgment in these situations. Give him 5 more minutes, Michael decided, though his grip remained firm on the tranquilizer rifle. Inside the cave, a breakthrough had occurred. The tiger, still cautious but no longer aggressive, had allowed Noah to move a few feet closer. He now sat about 10 feet from her, still maintaining respectful eye contact while using his body language to communicate peaceful intentions. "Friends are waiting outside," Noah said softly, gradually introducing human speech into the exchange. They can help your paw, make the pain stop. The tiger's response was subtle. A slight tilt of her massive head, a softer exhalation, but to Noah it represented permission, acceptance of his offered help. Very slowly, he reached for the communication device in his pocket and pressed a single button, the signal that he had established contact and it was safe for others to approach cautiously. When Dr. Chen, Michael, and the veterinarian carefully entered the chamber minutes later, they found a scene that still had the power to amaze them, despite years of witnessing Noah's abilities. The teenager sat on the cave floor, just a few feet from one of nature's most perfect predators, speaking to her in a mixture of words and sounds, while she watched him with what could only be described as wary trust. "Illegal pet trade," the vet whispered after a quick assessment of the tiger's condition. "See the marks around her neck? Someone kept her chained, probably smuggled her in as a cub, then couldn't handle her when she grew." Noah nodded, without taking his eyes from the tiger. "Her name was Raja, but she hates it. It reminds her of the bad place." He paused, listening to something only he could hear. "She escaped 3 weeks ago, when they were moving her. Broke her chain and ran. Her paw was injured jumping from a truck." Dr. Chen made notes rapidly on her tablet, documenting yet another example of specific information Noah could somehow extract from animal communications, information that could later be verified through investigation. "We need to sedate her," the vet said quietly, "to treat that paw and check for other injuries." Noah relayed this information to the tiger in his own way. She growled softly but made no move to resist when the vet carefully prepared the tranquilizer. "It's okay," Noah assured her. "When you wake up, the pain will be less. And you'll never go back to the chains. I promise." The tiger held his gaze as the dart found its mark, her massive body gradually relaxing as the sedative took effect. Even as her eyes closed, she kept them fixed on Noah, the first human since her cubhood who had spoken to her instead of shouting, who had respected her instead of fearing or exploiting her. Later, as the team worked together to transport the sedated tiger to their facility for treatment, Dr. Chen nudged Noah gently. "You did it again. Every time I think I've seen the limit of what's possible, you push the boundary further." Noah shrugged, uncomfortable as always with praise for what seemed natural to him. "I just listened. Anyone could do it if they tried." "That's not quite true, and you know it," she replied, though she understood his reluctance to acknowledge his unique gifts. Years of scientific tests had confirmed what the original bear miracle had suggested. Noah possessed an ability to communicate with animals that went beyond trained behavior or standard animal psychology. Whether through some enhanced perception of subtle cues, an intuitive understanding of animal communication systems, or something yet more extraordinary, his gift remained partly a mystery even to those who had studied it for a decade. As they loaded the tiger into their specially equipped vehicle, Michael approached with his satellite phone in hand, his expression serious. "Just got word from the anti-trafficking task force. They've been tracking a major smuggling operation moving exotic animals through this region. This tiger could be key evidence in breaking it up." Noah nodded, unsurprised. In recent years, his work had expanded beyond simple communication to include helping authorities combat wildlife crime. His ability to extract information from rescued animals had proven invaluable in numerous cases, leading to arrests and the dismantling of several trafficking networks. "She can tell us a lot," he confirmed, "once she trusts us more. Right now, she's too afraid." The tiger, whom they would later name Naya, meaning new in Sanskrit, symbolizing her new beginning, was just the latest in a long line of animals Noah had helped rescue, rehabilitate, and, when possible, return to the wild. Her case would indeed prove pivotal in breaking up an international trafficking ring, leading to dozens of arrests and the rescue of over 100 illegally held exotic animals. But for Noah, each animal was more than a case or a scientific study. They were individuals with their own stories, fears, and hopes. His gift had shown him that the inner lives of animals were rich and complex in ways most humans never recognized. That evening, after Naya had been settled into their rehabilitation facility and given emergency treatment for her injured paw, Noah sat with his mother on their porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. Though Eliza had aged gracefully, silver now threaded her dark hair, and the years of wondering and worrying about her extraordinary son had left fine lines around her eyes. "Another busy day saving the world," she said with gentle teasing, passing him a mug of hot chocolate. Still his favorite after all these years. Noah smiled, leaning against her shoulder in a rare moment of teenage vulnerability. Not the world, just one tiger. "One tiger, one bear, one eagle at a time," Eliza murmured, ruffling his hair affectionately. "It adds up." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the evening sounds of the forest, the calls of night birds, the rustling of nocturnal creatures emerging from their daytime hiding places. For Eliza, these remained pleasant background noises, but she knew that for Noah, each sound carried meaning, messages, stories. "Do you ever think about that day?" she asked suddenly. "The day with the bear, the beginning of all this?" Noah nodded, his expression thoughtful. "All the time. I still don't remember much about the rescue itself. I was too little. But I remember her eyes, how they changed when she realized I was trying to help." "You were just a baby," Eliza said, marvel still evident in her voice even after all these years. "Not even a year old. The researchers still can't explain how you knew what to do, or why she let you help her." Noah shrugged slightly. "Maybe that's why it worked. Because I was too little to know it shouldn't be possible." The wisdom in this simple observation struck Eliza anew. Perhaps that was indeed the secret. Noah had connected with the bear before human limitations and expectations had been imposed on his consciousness. Before he had learned what was impossible. "Dr. Chen thinks we're ready to expand the program," Noah said after another comfortable silence. "There are kids in other countries who show signs of having abilities like mine. Not as strong, maybe, but something. She wants to create a network, teach them what I've learned." Eliza felt a mixture of pride and the familiar maternal concern that had been her constant companion since Noah's abilities had first manifested. "And what do you think about that?" "I think—" Noah paused, formulating his thoughts carefully, as was his habit. "I think we need more people who can listen. The animals have so much to tell us, if we just learn how to hear them. About the changes in the environment, about what they need to survive, about how we can all live together on this planet." The simple profundity of his words brought unexpected tears to Eliza's eyes. From that first miraculous encounter with the bear to this moment, Noah's journey had been about building bridges between worlds that had grown too separate, the human and the wild, the domestic and the untamed. "The bear taught me that," Noah added softly. "That first bear. She told me that once long ago, all humans could speak with animals. We just forgot how, but we can remember if we try." As stars began to appear in the darkening sky above the mountains, Eliza thought about the extraordinary chain of events that had begun with a landslide and a baby.